The Washington Commanders value Terry McLaurin. He just says they don't value him enough. Eventually, one of these two sides is going to have to give, and it may not get resolved in time for the start of training camp. That and more right now on Locked On Commanders.
You are Locked On Commanders, your daily podcast on the Washington Commanders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is Locked On Commanders. I am David Harrison, your guy on the ground covering the Washington Commanders for WUSA 9 and right here with you 5 days a week. You can also find me writing about the Washington Commanders for Sports Illustrated's CommanderGameDay.com and follow me on X at DHarrison82. I want to thank you for making Locked On Commanders your first listen or view, and a special thank you goes out to all the everydayers who come through for every single episode. If you haven't already, please make sure you are subscribed for free on YouTube or wherever you're listening to today's episode. If it's your first time coming through the show, thanks for coming. Hopefully you find or you like what you find and what you hear, and you come back for more very, very soon. Coming up on today's episode, we're talking about the front office's vision for the team and what the addition of Von Miller means for the defense. But first, we're going to break down the high-stakes standoff between the Commanders and their star receiver, Terry McLaurin, as we heard from General Manager Adam Peters about that very topic on Tuesday. All of that is coming up today on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, a proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers, you can get $150 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. As Washington Commanders veterans arrive in Ashburn on Tuesday to kick off the 2025 NFL season, one question is hanging over the entire operation. Where is number 17? Terry McLaurin, at this point, at the time of this recording, no deal done, no extension, and no news on whether or not he's going to or not going to report. Obviously, the rest of the veterans are coming in, and that's going to be the biggest question is Terry McLaurin going to be in town? I expect that it is going to leak one way or another, whether he reported or whether he didn't report, and then Wednesday, we're going to show up for practice, and again, either number 17 is going to be there or he's not going to be there. Even if he's there, it could be a hold in where he's present. He's just not going to practice physically, might go through the meetings and hang out with his teammates and do all those things, which is probably what I would recommend that he does. But, you know, I'm not in his ear the way that some people are, and they may recommend that he does something different. So Adam Peters, pre-training camp press conference, just like we do every single year. And obviously Terry McLaurin was going to be the very first topic he was asked about, and he certainly was. And he was very firm, very blunt, very upfront about what he expects. And he said, quote, just like with really all of our players, we're expecting everybody to be here today, end quote. So he expects Terry McLaurin to be in Ashburn on Tuesday, report for camp, go through his physical, and then be with the team. You know what I mean? If he wants to hold in and not physically practice and all that stuff while he's doing the contract negotiations and his people are talking to Adam Peters in the front office and all that stuff, that's your prerogative, right? But as a player, you have a contract. You agreed to that contract. You signed that contract. And that contract says you're supposed to be at training camp with your teammates starting Tuesday, reporting, and then starting practice on Wednesday. Wouldn't be the first time that a star player held out of training camp and said, I'm not showing up until I'm paid and all this other stuff. But that is what Adam Peters expects of not just his star player, but of any player. And that is exactly what they said on Tuesday. Now, the reality of the dilemma is trying to find a solution, right? Adam Peters also talked about that. He said, quote, our goal is to get a long-term deal done. And so just keep focused on that. That's what it sounds like Terry wants. And that's what Adam Peters said very specifically on Tuesday, that is his goal as well. And he did say that they are talking and that they are having conversations. He feels like it's going in the right direction. And, you know, look, what is this all about? It's about being appreciated. Certainly. It's about being respected. Certainly. Valued, absolutely, but it's about money. You're right. Like that's in this business. That is how teams show players, show people that they're valued and they're appreciated is money. When Terry McLaurin came out and made his own public comments and talked to the media just last week, he said he felt like he was being underappreciated, undervalued. He said at one point he felt straight up disrespected by the team, and that he understands it's a business, but there's also an emotional side to it. I mean, these are people's lives, right? And he admitted that it's a little bit hard sometimes to separate the emotion from the business, but that is what Adam Peters is trying to do, is just keep it to the business and get rid of the motion. But the conversation really centers around the market, and that market has been incredibly skewed. And I remember going on Locked On NFL and talking about this with Tony Higgins on a Wednesday episode when it happened. The Cincinnati Bengals paying T. Higgins what they paid him to be their number 2 wide receiver. I know Jamar Chase said 1 alpha, 1A. And I get it. We had this conversation amongst the B reporters. Some of us are having this talk. T. Higgins could be a number 1 receiver on a lot of teams in the National Football League. But the bottom line is, what is T. Higgins? T. Higgins is the second receiver for the Cincinnati Bengals. And the Cincinnati Bengals paid him over $28 million annual average value on his extension. And that basically messed it up for every other team out there trying to negotiate with a wide receiver, including the Washington Commanders' Terry McLaurin, because if T. Higgins, the number 2 receiver on the Cincinnati Bengals roster, is making $28.5 million or close to $28.5 million annual average value, you better believe your number 1 receiver is going to want more money than that. And he's not going to want $29 million, right? Well, T is making $28.5. I want $29. No, he's going to want millions annual average value over what T. Higgins is getting. Now, what number is Terry wanting? Again, my projection at the beginning of this whole thing was $32.5 million was probably the floor of what Terry was looking for, right? So is that what he's looking for? I can't tell you, but clearly whatever he's looking for, the Commanders, at least up to the last time we heard about or from Terry, they were not close. You could just tell from the comments. And there was even a Commanders fan that responded to a post that I put out on X during or right after the press conference, who said, reading between the lines, it sounds like they're still not close on the value. Adam Peters tried to acknowledge the value of the player and said, quote, without a doubt, I think everybody in the building values Terry very much. We knew that coming in last year, and we knew that even more after spending a year with him, end quote. Like, they knew that they were getting a great player in Terry, a great leader, a great member of the organization, and then having him for a year last year, they confirmed that. But think about what we haven't talked about yet. We haven't talked about the production. And at the end of the day, guys, that's what this is going to be all about. That's what Adam Peters is going to want to pay for. He wants to pay Terry McLaurin. If this contract is going to be a true extension and this new money is going to start in 2026, when Terry McLaurin is 30, almost 31 years old, he wants to pay Terry McLaurin for what he expects Terry McLaurin to do when he's 30, 31, 32, however long this deal goes for, not what he already did as a 28, 27, 26-year-old, or what he expects Terry to do this season as a 29-year-old entering the season about to turn 30. That's not what you're going to get paid for. And, I completely get where Terry is coming from, talking about being appreciated and all that stuff. But at the end of the day, you don't get paid by an NFL franchise to do good things in the community. You don't get paid by an NFL franchise for being a good steward of the organization. Should you absolutely be valued that way? Absolutely, 100%. But the team also does things for you that is not in your contract as well. They make you a focal point. They put your picture everywhere. They help boost your jersey sales, right? They do all these other things. Like Daron Payne spent all last year, according to the coaching staff, being a leader in the defensive tackle room. But guess what? Daron Payne wasn't on the posters. Daron Payne wasn't on all the commercials. And Daron Payne certainly was not elevated publicly the way that the organization elevates guys like Terry McLaurin. So there's things that the organization does that's not necessarily part of your contract. Like, you don't have a contract that says, well, if I get 80 catches, you do a commercial featuring me and it's saying I'm a superstar for your team. It's not how that works. So there's things that you do that are outside your contract that you want to be appreciated for, but there's also things that the team does outside your contract that you need to appreciate as well. And I think that's really what Adam Peters was kind of getting to, is understanding the player's value, what drives them, their desires, but also understanding the situation as the organization. And that is, what makes this conversation so tricky, right? Because even in the 6 minutes or 7 minutes or so that we've been talking about it here, I'm going to say all these things, and any of them, whether it's pro team, something that I said, or pro Terry, something that I said, you could try to poke a hole in it by saying, yeah, but. And we're not even sitting down at the table trying to negotiate a contract. So imagine being one of the people at those tables trying to do this. So fans are frustrated. Media members, like, we just want it done. Like, we want this deal done, and we want to see it happen and see Terry on the practice field and get going, talking about highlights of Terry and Jaden connecting on deep balls and all those other things. But Adam Peters also pointed out in his time as the league executive, quote, I don't think I've ever been part of a negotiation where it's been really linear and smooth and everything like that. But I think understanding where they're at and understanding where we're at and trying to close that gap and come to something is really the nuance of it, end quote. So conversation's ongoing. We'll see when it ends, when it comes to a head. Ultimately, like I told you, I still stand on, I think Terry McLaurin is in burgundy and gold this year. It's just a matter of when we get to see him out there. The front office is locked in on a difficult negotiation with one star player, but they just pulled off a move to bring in another, diving into the signing of Von Miller and what it means for the Washington Commanders defense. Coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Commanders is brought to you by Rougiette. Guys, we're all tired of tense negotiations and waiting to get the deal done. You definitely don't want that kind of delay in your personal life either. And you've heard of Viagra, you've heard of Cialis, but if you want something that gets you ready for game time fast, it's time to get Rougiette Ready. Rougiette Ready is a next-gen treatment that amplifies arousal and boosts blood flow. Forget waiting around like it's a contract deadline or taking pills that need hours. Rougiette's 3-in-1 formula dissolves under your tongue and kicks in fast. We're talking an average of 15 minutes with effects that can last up to 36 hours. So head to Rougiette.com/LockedOnNFL. Use the code LockedOnNFL to get 15% off today. That's RUGIET.com/LockedOnNFL. Use the promo code LockedOnNFL for 15% off. Individual results may vary with prescription treatment. Compounded drugs are permitted to be prescribed under federal law, but are not FDA approved and do not undergo FDA safety, effectiveness, or manufacturing review. Please visit the Rougiette website for full safety information. Adam Peters made it clear in his press conference on Tuesday that building this roster wasn't finished after the draft. And he proved it by executing a move that he's been planning all offseason long, bringing in pass rushing help. So all offseason, we've been talking about it. We talked about it before free agency, during the draft, after the draft. Trey Hendrickson, Myles Garrett, TJ Watts, Dante Fowler, like you name the free agent or the draft prospect, Donovan Ezeraku, or the trade target. We've talked about it on this show because we've all been sitting here saying, look, you got stronger up front, got it. You got bigger up front, fantastic. Deron Payne, hopefully going to take a step. Johnny Newton going to take a step in his second year. Outstanding. But you still need a pass rush. And you lost your sack leader to the Dallas Cowboys, back to the Dallas Cowboys. And just looking at the roster, you just wonder, where is that pass rush productivity going to come from? Well, the Washington Commanders are hoping that Von Miller is going to at least come in and help. Well, the way we put it is we think he's more of a third down situational pass rusher, closer at the end of games to help seal the deal in wins. We'll see what actually happens on the field because, again, Zach Ertz was kind of viewed in a similar light offensively, and he turned out to be one of the primary players on the team. Now, this year, we're all expecting big role from him and big contributions, right? So why now? Why is the move coming now? Well, Adam Peters explained, quote, during free agency, we looked to add a few guys, and it didn't work out, but we saved some money aside, really, in order to do this and find the best guy out there, end quote. So it just kind of shows you, the roster management. And we talked about this, kind of ties back into the Terry McLaurin deal. Adam Peters is not going to bid against himself. Adam Peters is not going to go out there and say, well, the media says we need a pass rusher. The fans say we need a pass rusher. And yeah, we need a pass rusher, but we're not going to go out there and just outbid ourselves for the sake of going and getting a guy. We're going to get the right deal for this team, the right moment, and we're going to secure our future. Talk more about the future here in just a little bit. So what were those deals? What were those negotiations? Who were those players? We can guess, we can speculate. We don't really know. But at the end of the day, whatever the deal was, either the player opted, hey, great deal, but I'm going to take this other deal, or the Commanders eventually said, okay, we're not going to go as high as these other teams are going, so we're going to go ahead and bow out. Whatever it is, it just didn't work out with these other pass rushers. The Washington Commanders come through, and they get a pretty good guy on the field, but also in the locker room, right? Von Miller's value is going to be felt as a pass rusher, we expect, but Adam Peters also noted, quote, they're getting unsolicited calls from the teams that he has been on since then, talking about what a great guy he is. That's really made it a really easy decision to bring him in, end quote. I really butchered reading that quote too, but basically the crux of it, the importance of it is Adam Peters, the Washington Commanders, getting calls from the Rams, getting calls from the Bills, getting calls from the Broncos, people who have worked with them, know him. Obviously, Adam Peters knows him from their days together in Denver, all those things, but getting calls saying, you guys got a really good one there. And, I was doing a little bit of research on Von Miller. Obviously, you want to watch the tape, but you also want to try to get to know the man as much as you can. And I actually went back and watched, his introductory press conference from when he joined the Buffalo Bills, as an example, and just the amount of appreciation he had for the Los Angeles Rams, who he played for before he joined the Buffalo Bills, won a Super Bowl with them, all those things, and just talking about how much he appreciated his teammates, his coaches, the training staff, everybody in Los Angeles. But what really stood out to me is this is Von Miller's introductory press conference with the Buffalo Bills. Has not practiced, has not, he probably met some of his teammates, right? But he hasn't been in the locker room shooting the S, right? Doing all these things, hasn't been hanging around with them. But he's mentioning guys on the Buffalo Bills roster that you and I would know, even as non-Buffalo Bills people, but also guys that people don't know. I mean, he's going deep in the depth chart. You can just kind of tell that he was coming into Buffalo with a full knowledge of what it meant to be part of the Buffalo Bills organization, who he was playing with, who his teammates were. And it just really impressed me. It just really impressed me as a guy who is not coming into anything accidentally, not coming into anything on a whim. And when we get to talk to him either Wednesday or Thursday for the first time, I'm not going to be surprised at all if we hear similar tones about the Washington Commanders roster and him naming not just guys that everybody knows, Bobby Wagner and all that, but guys that not everybody who's not a Commanders fan or media member would know as well. And just kind of shows you who Von Miller is as a person coming into nothing unprepared. Looking at the tape, though, because obviously that's where we want to talk. And when we judge whether or not this contract or this signing is going to be a success, we're going to do it based off of production. Still very fast off the tape. There's been the NFL next gen stat coming around that says he's got the fastest get off of any person in his position group and all that stuff. And the tape shows it as well. AP said, quote, when you turn on the tape from last year, I was like shocked to see how good he still was and how well he got off the ball and just what type of impact he had on the field, end quote. And last year in Buffalo, he was a rotational pass rush specialist. So that role that you're going to ask him to fill in Washington, this isn't like a superstar coming in and saying, no, I want to be the superstar. I want to be the guy on the poster. I want to be the guy doing this. No, he knows what his role is. He's going to come in and he's going to do his role. I actually reached out and talked to somebody who has intimate knowledge, connection to the Buffalo Bills organization. And they told me how great of a guy Von Miller is and how great of a reputation he has as a locker room guy, just as a teammate. And when you go back again to some of the press conferences, Von will say himself, to toot his own horn a little bit, the thing he does best is rush the passer. The second best thing the thing he's second best at is being a really good teammate. So it's something that's very deliberate for him and very intentful for him to be a really good teammate. And that's what the Washington Commanders are going to get here this season. There are some past concerns, right? Obviously you have the injuries, but then you also have a couple of suspensions in Von Miller's history. Adam Peters was asked that question very specifically. And AP said, quote, with Von, knowing the type of person he is, the nature of situations, we felt really comfortable with that. And we did a lot of research to back that, end quote. And basically said at the end of that research, knowing Von, knowing what they do know of him, who they talk to about him, they felt comfortable bringing him in, even with some of that history that he has, with the suspensions and even with the injury and all that stuff. And really at the end of the day, that's kind of the point of it, right? There's no cookie cutter. There's no, well, he's been suspended twice, so he's never coming to my team. There's no that. It's what the situation is. Where's the context? How long has it been? What's the nature of the offense and all these things? And some people out there may not agree with, there might be a death blow. You get this type of an accusation or this type of suspension, you're just off my list altogether. And if that's your stance and you were making the roster decisions, so be it. That's what you would get paid to do. For AP and his staff, obviously, none of those were, done deal type of decisions. And they did their due diligence and they decided we're going to go ahead and bring Von Miller in. The addition of Von Miller, speaking of, is clearly a win now move, right? Von is Super Bowl hunting, ring hunting. The Commanders want him to go hunt that ring and find it for him. But it's also a sign and a piece of a much larger and more aggressive team building puzzle that AP and his front office are trying to put together. When it comes to windows or closing, however, AP just doesn't see it the same way as most of us do. That's coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by BetterHelp. This is an ad by BetterHelp. Workplace stress is at an all-time high. 61% of the global workforce is reporting higher than normal stress levels. This summer is the perfect time to take small steps to focus on your wellness and manage the challenges that come with your workday. Of course, most of us can't just quit our jobs and take endless vacations, and that's where BetterHelp comes in. Think about it like the Commanders just did with Von Miller. They saw an area where they needed professional, veteran help. They went out, they made a move. It's the same with our own wellness. I've seen how working with a therapist, a professional with expertise, can help people develop the positive coping skills to make those day-to-day challenges easier to manage. As the largest online therapy provider in the world, BetterHelp can provide access to mental health professionals with a diverse variety of expertise. Unwind from work with BetterHelp. Our listeners get 10% off their first month with BetterHelp.com/lockedon. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. Today's episode is also brought to you by FanDuel. Summer sports are in full swing, and let's be honest, a lot of us are just counting down the days to Commanders football. With the high-stakes negotiations and standoffs dominating the news, the wait can feel even longer. But while you wait for those deals to get done, FanDuel is the best way to make every other game a little bit more exciting. You're already following all the action. In our case, the inaction. So why not make things just a little bit more exciting? Instead of just refreshing your feed, waiting for news out of Ashburn, you can get in on a ninth inning comeback or a long shot golf bet right now with FanDuel. Look, I'm waiting for that big payout for Terry, just like you are. But in the meantime, I'm making my own win now moves on FanDuel. The app is easy to use and they're fast with their payouts, something we'd all like to see a little bit more of right now. Whether I'm playing a same game parlay or betting on the future, it makes me feel like I'm in on the action, not just sitting on the sideline. So if you're new to FanDuel, new customers can bet just $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. Open the FanDuel app today or visit FanDuel.com to get started. Quote, hopefully our window is as long as we're here, end quote. That is General Manager Adam Peters when asked about Super Bowl windows. That was the message. It's a direct challenge to the conventional wisdom that you have a window of opportunity to capitalize on whatever it is. A quarterback on a rookie contract, having an MVP quarterback at the first place. When I think about windows and championship windows, I always go back to the Green Bay Packers. 30 years of Hall of Fame quarterback play, and they got 2 Super Bowls out of it. To me, I mean, look, you love having 2 Super Bowls. Don't get me wrong. But to me, 30 years of Hall of Fame quarterback play, you got 2 Super Bowls out of it. One, it shows just how hard it really is to win and sustain winning, which makes the New England Patriots and even the Kansas City Chiefs even more impressive. 2, it's pretty disappointing, to be honest with you. I think even with as hard as it is to win, like 30 years of Hall of Fame quarterback play, I think you should have at least 5, right? Like 5 championships in that stretch. We'll see. Hopefully we're about to embark on, at least 10, 12 years of Hall of Fame quarterback play, and we'll see if the Commanders can get a couple of rings out of that. So Adam Peters, though, directly kind of, spitting in the wind, spitting in the face of the idea that there is a limited window. He said, quote, out of the 4 teams that were in the championship games, we were the only one that had a quarterback on his rookie contract still. So it's still possible to win after you pay a quarterback. Hopefully our window is as long as we're here, and that's what we're building for, end quote. So obviously the question, right, was like, you want to build as much as you can while you have a quarterback on a rookie contract. Go get Deebo Samuel, go get Laramie Tunsil, re-sign Terry McLaurin, front load his deal so that a lot of that money is gone by the time Jaden needs a new contract, right? Then you got Bobby and Zach Ertz year to year. Frankie Lou is going to need a new deal here pretty soon. All these types of things. And even some of these other rookies, right? Mikey Sanders still continues his trajectory. He's going to need a new deal. If Johnny Newton takes that step we're all hoping he takes this year, becomes a dominant defensive tackle in the next 2 to 3 seasons, he's going to need a new deal. So it all kind of just comes together. But Adam Peters says it's all about managing the roster. It's all about making the right moves. And again, we kind of go back to the bidding against yourself, right? If you start paying guys an exorbitant amount of money just because we got to get a pass rusher, we have to get a pass rusher. This is the best one out there. We got to go get him no matter how much we pay for him. That's how you end up putting your roster in a situation where you can't go fill these other holes because you don't have what I call Adam Peters' favorite word, optionality. And that leads into some 1-year deals, and it leads to some older guys, right? Despite having a rookie quarterback on his rookie deal, all these other things, all these draft picks. I mean, I think Dan Quinn said that last year they had like 10 or 11 rookies. I didn't go back and count, but he said they had like 10 or 11 rookies make the active 53 last year. Despite that fact, and then more rookies this year, the oldest roster in the National Football League lives in Washington, and it only got older with Von Miller joining the squad. AP said of that fact, quote, we're going to look for great players that fit us, and whether they're 22 or 35, if they can help us win, we're going to bring them in, end quote. I think that's the perfect way to approach it. I'm not worried about having the youngest roster, the middle of the age roster, or the oldest roster. I'm worried about having the right dudes in the right places to make things happen. So it becomes a lot easier when Washington is a destination location, like Von Miller 2 years ago. If he's going ring hunting, probably not looking at Washington twice, right? But this year, Washington's a prime location. And Adam Peters gave a lot of credit to that for Dan Quinn. Said that there's a lot of coaches on this staff that wanted to come work for Dan Quinn. There's a lot of players like Bobby Wagner, for example, that wanted to come play for Dan Quinn. So without Dan Quinn, a lot of these good pieces, a lot of these great pieces are not in place, and this roster looks a whole lot different. In fact, I went, we had these conversations. I remember during the lead up to the coaching hire, like Dan Quinn was not at the top of really anybody's list, right? Like nobody had Dan Quinn top of the list of coaching candidates, and some were even a little bit disappointed when Dan Quinn was the hire. But when you look at it now, obviously everybody's on board, because why wouldn't you be? But it just kind of shows you what the impact of getting the right person is. And I don't think this team has near the coaching staff it has if they hire any of these other coaches who got hired last year. And I certainly don't think this team has success, even with Jaden Daniels as quarterback, as they had last year. So I think literally Dan Quinn is the only coach that I look out there and see who got hired in 2024 to run new teams. DQ is the only one I look at and say, this could have happened with this guy. Obviously, it did happen with this guy. Also mentioned the upgraded facilities, right? So not just talking about Dan Quinn and the culture and all this stuff is important as well, but they've got a new locker room, which I don't know is public. Actually, yeah, Tyler Owens, I believe, posted a picture of it on his Instagram story, and they got screenshotted and sent out there. Hopefully he doesn't get in trouble for that, because it wasn't supposed to be real just yet. But we got a little bit of a glimpse of the locker room before Tyler decided to post it. Very nice looking. We'll get more details. I'll put out more details about that when we get the green light to go ahead and do so. But talk about the new locker room. They have new meeting room, new nutrition center. The new bubble is up, looks really nice, and just goes on. They've got the training room is completely redone. They've got new tubs, hyperbolic chambers, all kinds of stuff. The players are through the roof. Great feedback about what the organization is doing. They're working with some old bones, they're working with some limitations, but what they have to work with, they're doing great things for these players. And that just makes guys even happier, right? When you come to work in a comfortable environment, it makes you happy to be there. You're going to tell your friends how fun it is to be there, and it's going to bring other people to the organization as well. That's going to do it for today's episode. Next time on Locked On Commanders, the real work is getting started on Wednesday. We're going to put 3 players squarely under the microscope. In the meantime, if you've got questions or comments, you can text them directly to me by becoming a Locked On Commanders insider at joinsubtext.com/LockedOnCommanders. Not only are you going to text me, but I'm going to text you some of that inside information, some insight, and also during practices, press conferences, all kinds of fun stuff. We spent today discussing the Commanders' aggressive win-now philosophy and the tense contract standoff with the star receiver. But how does the rest of the league view their top-tier talents? The brand new Locked On NFL Top 100 gives us the answer. Find out where Jaden Daniels ranks after just one NFL season, justifying the team's bold vision, and why Terry McLaurin's top-tier placement is the very reason his contract situation is the biggest story in Ashburn. Hear the full Top 100 breakdown on Locked On Sports today, available now on YouTube or wherever you're getting your podcasts. And to the everydayers, I see you every day. I appreciate you every day, and I thank you for coming through today. Until next time, stay safe, be good to one another. Stay safe, not safe. I don't know what that is. Stay safe, be kind to one another. We'll see you right back here next time for another episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.